So a lot of people have asked me to talk about sensible centrism, which is something that academic agent's been pushing, and also the distributists and a number of other people have been talking. Basically, the premise is that people in the dissident right have a branding problem or an optics problem, or I guess more so than anything, a naming problem. That the term dissidents right conjures the image of a bunch of malcontent, angry college kids who just hate everything and listen to grunge and think Columbine's awesome. And just kind of all this other stuff. And it just innately alienates the mainstream and renders us, the movement, whatever you want to call it, to being on the margins of society. And so his idea is okay, we need to stop accepting the left's premise. We need to stop allowing them to define us as being extremists, as being crazy, being irrational, as being radtrads or whatever. We need to define ourselves as just holding sane position, as saying stuff like there are men and women, that children are best when they're raised by a mother and father, that you should put criminals in jail, that there's things like a culture and a nation and biological reality exists and all these other things were just taken for granted for like 99% of human history. And it's literally a lot of this stuff is just things people came up with in the 1960s and 1970s that weren't even really taken seriously until maybe 20 years ago. And so his term he wants to use is sensible centrist, to say, well, promoting traditional values, acknowledging there only being two genders, wanting to shut down immigration, promoting a national culture, all of these things are just kind of a sensible, normal position. There's something that a sane person who has some understanding of how the world actually works would support it and would promote. And I do think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I've had my kind of lame position that I call political naturalism, where a lot of my ideas just come from an honest studying of history, looking at what's causes societies to succeed, what causes societies to fail, what leads to a happy, healthy, productive populace, what leads to a moral populace, and what leads to a decadent populace. The one I always bring up is every successful society that I'm aware of has had some conception of marriage between a man and a woman. Now, so some societies have obviously had polygamy, but in places like Babylon, China, Japan, the Americas, the concept of marriage is just something that seems to naturally exist in human society. And for the most part, any study I've ever seen shows that children who are raised in a two-parent environment just turn out better, overwhelmingly on average. And you can argue that from a religious perspective, but it's just a basic empirical observation. But I think getting back to it, that was kind of what NRX was sort of about, was taking a lot of traditional positions, a lot of reactionary positions that people used to hold, more out of nostalgia and custom than for any kind of rational reason, and using modern science and genetics and sociology to kind of provide a more objective scientific way of looking at these things. And so the term sensible centrist is like, look, it's just common sense. It's just we're just doing what the logical thing is in this particular context. And I think the position sensible centrist is kind of cringy. I don't particularly like it. I'm open to the idea of coming up with a new term. My issue, though, and this is my concern, is if we start renaming and start rebranding and stuff, it is necessary. But it could also lead to just everything getting watered down and just kind of abandoning core principle after core principle. And I don't mean to purity spiral, but there's some things I just don't think people can really give up on. And it would kind of defeat the entire purpose, like just some very fundamental thing. If you go too far into that direction of we have to appear moderate on everything, people will mean themselves into thinking they're moderates, into thinking they're a liberal, into thinking they're whatever. That being said, I acknowledge that even given that risk, it might be something that we have to do at some. So I do think Academic Agent has a good idea of trying to stop using terms like, at least when we're talking to people outside of our circles, stop saying far right, stop saying reactionary, stop saying dissident right, and just try to come up with something a little more palatable to the average person. Even the term conservative doesn't really reflect how I think most of people in these circles actually think. Uh, Especially a lot of people in these circles don't have very laissez-faire attitudes towards economics. And modern conservatism is just conserving the status quo from like 10 years ago. So I don't like the term sensible centrist. I don't have one to maybe offer in its place. So I guess you can use it until you come up with something better. My biggest issue, though, with Academic Agent's video is I think he's exceedingly naive. And I say this as someone who wishes they could be as naive as he is, as someone who wishes that I can hold the view of the public that he does. Maybe it's different in England than in Canada. I kind of doubt it. Where he thinks things like reducing immigration or family values or not having a majority of your income taken by the government or having not having kids' dicks chopped off or not killing babies or any of these things are unpopular and that if given the chance people would vote against them. Um I don't think that's the case. I think in Canada, if anything, if you held a referendum on immigration, people would probably want more. They'd probably vote for more. They'd vote for more hate speech laws, more diversity, more multiculturalism, more destruction of the traditional family. Even people who live largely lives that are not relevant to this. Like the most pro immigration parts of Canada are the whitest and the ones with the least diversity. And they're trying to find some ways to bring more of it in. So I don't think it is a sensible centrist position. It isn't in Canada at least. It is not a centrist position to be against afterbirth or post birth abortion. Being against post birth abortion is a radical right wing position. Um, Being against allowing known members of ISIS to immigrate to Canada was considered a position so radical that Justin Trudeau claimed to have abandoned electoral reform in the fears that it might allow someone who is against ISIS members immigrating to Canada uh, might come to power and prevent that from happening. I mean, this is a country where Justin Trudeau said ISIS members are the same as Greek and Italian immigrants and will come to respect them in time, and the Conservatives by and large agree with it. Andrew Scheer was not allowed to run for office pretty much because he said, I personally am pro life because I'm a practicing Catholic, but I won't bring in legislation. And the attitude towards that was, no, in his personal life, in his religious life, he had to deny his faith publicly and denounce the church in the way that Justin Trudeau has done, or else he can't even be allowed to run for office. So, no, I mean, also holding the opinion that you shouldn't cut kids' dicks off is a radical opinion that will, a large proportion of the population, perhaps majority, will say you should probably be killed for saying that. So, it's not, it is a radical. What we would kind of think is very mild stuff is so radical, it's not even something that can really be discussed in public. Like it's getting to the point that I'm sure sooner or later it's not going to be acceptable to admit that you eat meat in public. At least in a lot of the work environments where I work in now, there are vegans who just kind of subtly bully everybody into not having meat or just throwing a fuss or trying to raise HR complaints or something like that to try to get meat removed from everything. You have all the people who pretend to have celiac disease when they clearly don't, who get good baked goods just banned from everywhere. Who knows? Maybe they're just going to completely ban gluten and wanting to have gluten in your bread will be an extreme position. I'm sorry if I just sound super black pilled about this and acting like there's no hope and any attempts to appeal to the general public is going to end in failure. It might just be that I'm a Canadian, and I come from, other than maybe Sweden, like the most paused place in the. It's kind of hard for me. I think in a lot of other countries, people are less pro-immigration, even if they're as liberal or more liberal on social issues. They're more hostile to immigration and multiculturalism. But no, I think it's a valiant effort. I think trying to make a lot of our views more palatable to more, at least the right wing of the Republican Party or the right wing of the conservative movement, I think would be good. If you could even go from representing maybe like 2% of the population to 15% of the population, that would be a massive improvement. I do think the original idea that the optics wars was fought over, that you would get people who would, you get like a pack of people with similar, I guess, dissident right views together, and you would try to get candidates who shared your views elected through fundraising and volunteering and communications and stuff like that, and then get them into positions where they can propose legislation or amend legislation or just get kind of ideas out there, was a good one, but that seems to have not really gone anywhere. I think it went somewhere for some people, but not for others. So I don't really have a solution to it. I think I wish him luck in his sensible centrist thing. I still think the name is kind of cringy. I just don't think you're going to convince the general public. Maybe it's different in England, the average person, that any of the things that even like moderate conservatives from like the 80s believe in are not extreme right ideas that have no place in civilized society. I just don't think that's going to go anywhere. Once again, I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that I'm just really, really cynical and things aren't as bad as I think they are. But I just try to be real with you guys. Um, that's my opinion. That's my thoughts on it. God bless everyone and have a good day.